Hey guys, I hope you're doing alright. I wanted to make a video with some tips on Halo 5 Slayer, and yes, I know I already made a video talking about this, but that video is over 2 years old, and it was really just talking about the fundamentals. So I figured it'd be a good idea to make a more advanced version for anyone that's interested. Also, you should consider joining our Discord so that you can take part in game nights and future tournaments. I've dropped an invite link for that in the video description. So one of the most valuable things that I've started doing is really trying to get good at the different movement techniques. By this I mean all those fancy jumps that you see the pros doing. There is quite a bit of debate as to how useful these jumps actually are, and to be honest, there's a lot of situations where you'd probably be fine not learning them at all. But there are a few areas that these techniques can be very useful, and I'll go over those a little later in the video. Now, there's 3 main movement techniques that you should know how to do. The first one is pretty basic, and that's called a thrust slide. Essentially, all you're doing is sprinting, activating your thrust, and then immediately holding crouch to slide. Now, I use this all the time, and it seems simple, but it can have a pretty big impact on how quickly you can get from point A to point B. One thing that you need to make sure of before doing this is you have to make sure that in your controller settings, you have toggle crouch disabled. If you have it enabled, then this just isn't going to work. The next technique is called a stabilized jump, and this one is super fun to do. For this, what you want to do is after you hit the jump button, activate your scope. This will activate stabilize, allowing you to hover upwards, letting you jump higher than normal. So the final technique is called a super jump. And to do this, all you have to do is combine a thrust slide with a stabilized jump. So that's sprint, thrust, slide, jump, stabilize, and mash crouch. This one can be used to either get across large gaps quickly, or just to jump to places that you normally wouldn't be able to get to. Something to keep in mind with the super jump is the sooner that you jump out of your slide, the higher your peak jump height is going to be. Combine that with activating stabilize, and this opens up a whole world of jumping possibilities. The biggest thing with these techniques is you have to practice. A good map for this is Eden, which is the map that you see me on now. Once you can make it across this gap without using clamber, then you're probably good enough at it that you can start using it in multiplayer. So the next big thing that you should start doing is adjusting your starting play based on where you spawn on the map. Most of the maps in the arena playlist have 8 different initial spawn points. I'm going to be using Plaza to show you what I mean. So when you jump into a Slayer match on Plaza, you'll most likely be spawned at one of the 4 major spawn points, which are located at each corner of the map. This will be either Cinema, Plaza, Cafe, or Tram. So let's start with Plaza. For the most part, when I spawn Plaza, the first thing that I do is grab the plasma pistol. This is one of the most overlooked guns on the map, but you need to make sure that you grab it because when the enemy team gets the overshield, which is pretty likely, this is the most effective way to drain their shields. The next thing that I do is I try to get up to top gold, because that gives me a bird's eye view of the overshield, and typically that's where everybody is headed right off the break. Now, there are a few other options. I could try to run through Orange Hall and get to the overshield that way, but the problem is that's right in line of sight from the tram spawn. So you'll be taking fire as soon as you get to the other side of the hall. Another way that you could go is through the Flowers doorway to try to get to Bridge. But you'll run into the exact same problem because that's right in the path of the cafe spawn. Top gold is the only way to challenge the overshield without being in a direct line of sight from another spawn point. So the way that we get up there is by using the stabilize jump. So remember, you jump, stabilize, and then mash crouch. And this gives us a full view of the area around the overshield, and if you wanted to try to grab it before the enemy team, then you could do that from here as well. Now let's take a look at Tram. So from here, we could head over to the Plaza spawn, and we could try to get some shots off in the enemy team, and maybe whoever gets up to top gold. Another thing that we could do is head up the stairs to challenge for the sniper. But typically what I like to do if I spawn Tram is go straight through the center, because it's basically just a straight shot to the overshield. The problem is that this path isn't actually much faster than any of the other spawn points. But what we can do is we can use the super jump technique to get there much faster. So to do that, we're going to sprint, slide, jump, stabilize, and then mash crouch. And as you can see, this method is much more efficient, and for the most part, this will get us to the overshield before anybody else. You could also use this jump to get over to the Plaza spawn quickly, so that you can challenge top gold if that's what you wanted to do. Every map will offer different advantages depending on the different spawn points, so make sure that you're thinking about what those advantages are and what you can do to make the most of them. Another big thing that I'd like to mention is map control. One of the best things that you can do as a Halo player is understanding this concept. And if you're unclear of what exactly it means, then I'll give you a basic rundown. When a match starts, every team is currently controlling a specific area of the map. and as those teams move around, they start to change their influence across the different areas. You probably already understood this portion of the idea, but the real skill comes in when you intentionally challenge specific parts of the map so that you're able to influence the enemy team's spawn locations. If you manage to push your team ahead like this, what happens is as long as you maintain that level of control, you'll always be a few steps ahead of the enemy team. I'll try to illustrate this so it's a bit easier to understand. So on Plaza, let's say your team just pushed into Cinema, and now you guys control a sniper spawn. As your team controls that section of the map, the respawn system is going to be trying to decide where to spawn the enemy players. 9 times out of 10, they'll probably spawn the opposite side of the map. So in this case, that's Plaza. So since your team now knows where the enemy team is going to be coming from, now you can make decisions based on that. The same thing would happen if your team controlled, say, Cafe. The enemy team would probably spawn in Tram, or vice versa. The most essential skill that you'll need in order to pull this off is communication. This means making sure that you know what the different areas of the map are called, and getting to know the lingo so that you can do this effectively. So to wrap this up, if you want to make more efficient plays and be able to get up to those spots that you wouldn't otherwise be able to, then you're going to want to spend some time practicing these jump techniques. You also need to make sure that you take into account where the different spawn points are so you can figure out the different advantages and options available so you can adjust your play accordingly. The last thing is making sure that map control is something that you're always thinking about. This is an essential part of Halo's multiplayer, so if your team causes a control rotation, make sure that you can recognize that and use it to your team's advantage. Alright, thanks for watching guys. If you like this video, then consider subscribing, and make sure to check out our other content. Also let me know in the comments if there's any other videos that you might want to see. And as always, thanks for hanging out.